Senator Baldwin, the chairman for the afternoon. This afternoon, we're going to talk about firefighters, if you couldn't tell by the people on the bright side of the room. Ms. Shipman, would you like to present and start us off this afternoon?
Certainly. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Hello to the committee members. I'm Donna Shippen with LSO. I'm in the Research and Evaluation Division. And I was asked to put together a little fact sheet that you'll find in your meeting materials. It should be under the section on firefighter recruitment. It's regarding what other states have done to create incentives for volunteer firefighter and EMT recruitment and retention. When I looked at what other states have done, and I specifically was looking at legislation, the most common thing is states have created pension plans similar to Wyoming for volunteer firefighters and EMTs. Wyoming's at least one of 30 states that have volunteer pension plans. Some states refer to these as length of service award programs. The funding source for these volunteer firefighter and EMT pension plans varies. Wyoming and many states uses a fire insurance premium tax to fund the pension plan. Other states, Colorado being one example, rely on property tax, mill levies, or other local tax revenues to fund those pension plans. Another difference I found between state volunteer pension plans is some plans require member contributions. Our plan does that, and other states don't. Whatever the funding source is, whether it's the fire insurance premium tax or local revenues, the volunteers are not required to contribute to the plan. That being said, I did look at one state that doesn't require member contributions. That was Montana, and their pension fund is not as large as ours, perhaps as a result. So the pension benefit that they pay to their volunteers is not as generous. I did talk with the Wyoming Rural Firefighters Association, and they told me that some volunteer firefighter agencies cover the member contribution for their volunteers, but other agencies do not because they can't afford to. There's some information on page 2 of the fact sheet about the volunteer firefighter, EMT, and search and rescue pension fund here in Wyoming. I know Wyoming Retirement Services Director Swindell is here, and he can probably talk much more knowledgeably than I can about that fund. And then if you go to page 3 of the fact sheet, some other programs I found that states have implemented is at least 2 states, New York and Utah, have passed laws to allow volunteer firefighters or EMTs to participate in their state health insurance plan. New York extends eligibility to their volunteer firefighters and ambulance companies, but the volunteers are required to cover the entire cost of their premium. Utah just last year passed a bill creating the volunteer EMS personnel health insurance program that allows EMTs to participate in the state employees health insurance program. The state covers the entire premium for the volunteer himself or herself, but the volunteer has to cover any additional premium for spouse or family. Some additional programs I found, Virginia has passed a law that allows state employees additional paid leave so that state employees can volunteer with a fire department or rescue squad. If you turn to page 4 of the fact sheet, it summarizes tax benefits that states have passed. I found 7 states that provide a state income tax credit to their volunteers. Obviously, that's not something Wyoming would do. We don't have a state income tax. I did find 2 other states, Connecticut and New York, that offer property tax exemptions for volunteers, which I thought might be of interest to people who serve on the Revenue Committee. So you can kind of kill 2 birds with 1 stone, property tax relief and volunteer recruitment. And then Virginia has a personal property tax exemption, or I should say allows local governments to offer a personal property tax exemption or reduction for volunteer automobiles, either for the property tax itself or for annual license fees charged for automobiles. And then at the bottom of page 4, it talks about what Tennessee has done to create a volunteer educational incentive program that pays volunteer firefighters a stipend for completion of required annual training. And then finally on page 5, Virginia has passed a law allowing local cities and counties to establish a tuition reimbursement program for their volunteers. So it's not mandated, but the local community, that's an option that local communities can offer. So I didn't find a lot, but that's what I found in addition to the pension plans, which are the most common recruitment and retention tool used by
Questions from the
states.
Shippen Committee? Seeing none, you got off the hook easily. Thank you very much for putting that together, Donna. Okay, with that, let's not just have one at a time. I think you ought to elect at least one person to come up with you, Mr. Matthews. Yeah, Lanny stood up. I knew he would. Please introduce yourself and tell us everything that's on your mind.
I'll keep it brief. Mr. Chairman, Byron Matthews, Director of Fire Prevention Electrical Safety, otherwise known as the Wyoming State Fire Marshal. We've identified, as you'll hear from the great groups today and the rest of the ideas that you have in the packet, we've obviously identified that recruitment and retention is an all-encompassing topic that affects all of our Wyoming fire service. It also affects our Wyoming EMS, as we talked about earlier this morning. We obviously need more members on each of the departments. We look at the communities, we talk about the need, we talk about that. All of that, it's clearly identified. We need to find a solution. Like I said, you'll hear the ideas coming up this afternoon. The Fire Marshal's Office, we provide the training, electrical safety, and fire prevention throughout the state. It gives us the opportunity to be that conduit between yourselves, our friends in the back with all the additional agencies, and the firefighters. So with that, that's where we are on recruitment and retention. I'd take any questions.
Questions for Mr. Matthews? Committee? You'll get another shot at him if you want it. Thank you, Brian.
Thank you.
Okay, with that, next on my list here is the Wyoming Fire Advisory Board, Wyoming Rural Fire Association, and Wyoming Fire Chiefs Association. I see two fine gentlemen in white shirts stepping up. And Lanny's going to make the journey the rest of the way up this time. Welcome, gentlemen, who've made a long, we'll ask you questions. Mr. Applegate, we won't let you be totally quiet. You've traveled long distance to get here. We appreciate you being here. So head it off however you want, introduce yourselves. And you guys, committees, these gentlemen have done a lot of work with the fire service across the state and putting together ideas. You've got them in your packet. They went through a great deal of trouble in getting all these ideas. Some of them workable, some of them probably not, but things we need to consider. And they've done a lot to get here today and a lot to put this together. So with that, gentlemen, go ahead.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Shad Cooper. I'm the fire chief for Sublette County Unified Fire, and I'm also the county fire warden for Sublette County. I also serve as the president of the Fire Advisory Board, which is the executive board of the Wyoming Rural Firefighters Association. If you're not familiar, the Wyoming Rural Firefighters Association represents the county fire wardens throughout the state for all 23 counties. And what that means is generally speaking, a fire chief, actually, now I'm thinking about a good analogy would be a police chief representing a municipal police department and a county sheriff representing the unincorporated areas of the county. It's very similar with my organization. The county fire wardens represent the unincorporated areas of the county for making sure we have fire response. And that's what the Rural Fire Association does. We make sure we have wildland fire response protocols and interoperability plans with our local, state, and federal partners to make sure we can go to wildland fire incidents. And there's a lot more to it than that, but So I'm here on behalf of Wyoming Fire Service, and as Senator Baldwin had mentioned, we've put a lot of work into that, and I'm going to get to that in a few moments after let the rest of the members here introduce themselves.
Mr. Chairman, I'm Lanny Applegate. Many of you I've worked with over the years, and I'm here to represent the Wyoming Fire Service also. Mainly in the long run, it is helping with the work with the legislators directly on any bills that may come out of this here. And so that's why I've been invited up here. There's a lot of folks behind me that actually sat on the committee with Shad that put this all together, and kudos to them from me for a job well done. A lot of thoughts and ideas. We'll see where they go. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll end.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to take off my morning hat and put on my afternoon hat. I'm Eric Quinney, again, Chief Administrative Officer for Uintah County Fire and Ambulance. I'm also the president of the Wyoming Fire Chiefs Association, which represents all the fire chiefs across the state, both volunteer and paid career, and those that are combination departments that consist of career, paid staff, and volunteers. I'm also the Wyoming director that represent Wyoming on the National Volunteer Fire Council. The National Volunteer Fire Council represents roughly the 700,000 volunteer firefighters across the United States. The comments that we're going to talk about today, we represent the entire Wyoming Fire Service, both volunteer and career paid. So when we talk, sometimes we'll use the phrase volunteers because much of Wyoming is made up of volunteer firefighters. But a lot of the issues that we're talking about are not just affect the volunteers, they affect the career departments as well. And the problem exists, many of the problems with recruitment and retention that we're going to talk about are broad-based and affect the fire service as a whole. And so I was just going to lead in a little bit to our conversation and talk about kind of why we're here. And then we're going to transition into Chief Cooper in terms of some specific Wyoming data and ideas that we have come up with to maybe start to address some of the issues. Just in terms of numbers, on the national level, there's about 1 million firefighters in the United States. And like I said earlier, about 700,000 of those are volunteers. The time donated by volunteer firefighters saves localities across the country about an estimated $46 billion a year in what volunteer firefighters are providing, and that are providing to the communities and saving the communities that much money. If we were to abolish volunteers, that would have to be replaced with about $46 billion a year nationally to be able to provide the level of service that is being currently provided. Like we talked about this morning, the volunteerism is aging. The volunteer population is aging, and the workforce is aging. And in getting people to fill these positions is becoming more difficult in many of our communities across the state. And we have a lot of fire departments that vary across the state. But these issues are not just, what I wanted to make my point was, these issues are not just Wyoming. This is a national issue. And that data that I talked about earlier comes from the National Volunteer Fire Council that we work together with the International Association of Fire Chiefs, the International Association of Firefighters, and on a collective basis to be able to attempt to solve some of these problems with recruitment and retention. And you try to address why our volunteerism is declining, and a lot of that is social issues. But in terms of what the fire service has become is a whole different animal. 50, 60 years ago, the fire department put out fires. And that's about all the fire department did. And now the fire department puts out fires, enforces fire codes, goes and cuts people out of their vehicles on vehicle crashes, rescues people from hazardous material situations, rescue people that may have fallen down a cliff or a mountain. In Uintah County, we have had a lot of those wonderful white windmills put up, and now we're responsible for knowing how to rescue somebody that may have a medical issue while working 300 feet up in the air. And we have to respond to railway disasters with the railroad coming through. And what my point is that so much has been placed on the fire service in 2023 that wasn't 50 to 60 years ago. And so does this scare some people away? Maybe. They're hearing on the news that firefighters are dying because of cancer, and that cancer, which the legislature a few years ago was able to pass legislation that made cancer if you're a firefighter and you get cancer, it's presumed that you got cancer because of your job as a firefighter. But we're asking people to serve, whether it's career or volunteer, to put their life on the line. We want you to come to work. You may get cancer, but we want you to come to work. And is this scaring people away? It's part of our issue. Obviously, the time demands and the training requirements in terms of not knowing how to put out fire, but also to do all these other, what we can kind of consider all hazards, is becoming a big burden. And so when we came, this whole process started, a couple years ago when the discussion that we needed to do something with recruitment and retention, and to bring it as an interim topic. And a committee was formed, and I'm going to transition this over to Chief Cooper to talk about his committee and the data that they went out and got from the communities in Wyoming to show you, and I think you have that data in front of you that he's going to talk about, to show you that I'm talking about national, but now we want to talk about Wyoming and what our problems are.
I remind the committee, if you have any questions as we go along, please feel free to jump in and just wave your hand or jump up and down. I would remind Mr. Quinney didn't tell us about rescuing cats out of trees, another service that we provide. Go ahead, Mr. Cooper.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As Eric Quinney had mentioned, we were, this has been an ongoing issue for many years. And last year, the Fire Advisory Board, the Rural Fire Association, and the Wyoming Fire Chiefs Association had discussed putting together a joint committee made up of our representative bodies and representing the fire service to address this issue and try to come up with some recommendations that we think might be something that we could implement within the state. And one of the big things we wanted to do was to submit a interim topic request to be here before you today and see if we could work together with our local state and local county and state leaders, and specifically the state legislature, to try to tackle this problem, because it's something that impacts the entire state. So our committee was made up from representatives from across the entire state geographically, and we sat down, we met every week and talked about, what is the problem and what are some of the solutions and what are some of the recommendations that we could look at. And one of the questions came up when we first met was, what local data is there from the Wyoming Fire Service? And as Mr. Quinney had alluded to, there's pretty good data from the National Volunteer Fire Council that cites, national statistics, but we don't have a whole lot on state statistics. And so we put together a Google survey, a Google form, and distributed it statewide to all the fire departments, the fire chiefs, and the county fire wardens, and asked them a few basic questions that we thought might be relevant to the conversation. And one, I don't want to belabor the entire survey, but one of the biggest aha moments that came out of this was that there was a significant amount of response. There was, I believe, don't quote me on this, but I believe there's about 54 fire departments that were represented that responded. And of those departments that responded, there was, they showed a need that collectively, we're about 500 firefighters short in the state right now. You know, that was one of the questions we asked was, how many people are currently on your roster and how many people would you look for to have a full roster? And the answer came back, and we tallied that up and came up with a number that we're about 500 firefighters short. And I don't have any statistical data to support it, but anecdotally, I can tell you that in my own fire department, our numbers are going down each year further and further. And I think we're trending downward in the number of volunteers. We're certainly not trending upwards. The problem's not getting better. So it's a pressing need, and we have, several representatives from the Wyoming Fire Service here today to support this need and have the conversation with our legislators to emphatically ask for help to address this. And the other thing we did as our committee was meeting is we wanted to make sure that we didn't come to you today with a problem and no solution. And so that's one of the things we really wanted to do today was come to you with a list of recommendations. Now they're just that. They're what we called them when we were meeting was brainstorming solutions. And so we solicited input from Wyoming fire chiefs and county fire wardens and just said, hey, throw some ideas at us. Let's collect them. And then we actually collected a lot of ideas that made a lot of great sense, but they weren't anything that the state legislature would be able to address. And so we tried to parse those down and came up with a list of brainstorming suggestions that we thought might have some sort of legislative solution. And if you'll bear with me, I'd be happy to walk through some of those recommendations with you and speak to some of the ideas. Now, I want to emphasize that there's going to be a lot more questions than I can answer, but these are just the list of recommendations that we started putting together.
I think we got one question for you now, Representative Warnock.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So as a result of bringing in all that data, were there any noticeable factors of, cities need more than counties? Counties are short-staffed more on a greater level than cities? Was there any noticeable things, or is it kind of across the board throughout the state of Wyoming, cities, counties, everybody has this shortage that you're noticing? Can you expand on some of that information that you found?
Chief Cooper.
Mr. Chairman, I see Lanny's nodding his head. I think he's got a different answer than I do, but.
No, that survey you did.
Push.
Which part is spelled out.
Microphone.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Hornick, because you're from Laramie County, I'll just grab one there. District 1 down there, Fire District 1. They've got approximately 40 firemen, and they need at least another 35. That's how far. And their problem is with firemen is that a lot of their volunteers are from the base. And so they get them anywhere from 2 months to 2 years and they're gone. So they don't stick around. And then, like I say, they've got 5 career firemen on there and they've got approval up to 9, but they're struggling to get those. But if you look at that number, that's 63%. That's 63% of their department they're short. And that's kind of a scenario that Shad will probably share with you. It's like that. It's pretty common across the statewide like that. But I just picked that one because of your area down there. And but yeah, there's no question that there's a shortage statewide in many different aspects. As far as how many are short on career versus volunteer, I can't answer that. Shad may have that in his survey. I know he got a lot of feedback on his survey he put out. And so with that, I'll turn it back to Shad, Mr. Chairman.
Go, Chief.
Mr. Chairman. Yeah, to answer the question or to follow up, we received input from career, combination, and volunteer fire departments throughout the entire state. Consistently, when we asked, one of the questions was, would a statewide recruitment and retention effort help your fire department? The answer was resoundingly yes from all the respondents, or almost all the respondents. The concise answer is yes. I'll leave it at that.
And I would share, Representative Hornock, just an example from my own department. With the disclaimer to the whole committee is that I am a fire chief in my community, and that I have 30 positions. I'm budgeted for 30 positions. I have gear for 30 positions. Right now, I have 18. It says on my form 22. I've lost 4 since then, and I can't find a recruit. My folks work at the mine, they work at the gas plant, and they want to do other things with spare time. I can't get people. So and I think that's pretty reflective across the state. And I think it's not just counties or state, it's everybody.
Yes. Including
Including paid departments. The number of people applying for paid departments has decreased significantly.
Yeah.
It's way down.
And I can follow up with that with Mr. Chairman. I've had several conversations with the career fire chiefs, and they've all indicated that we're all struggling. We're all in the same position. It's very difficult to recruit firefighters, regardless if they're, volunteer or combination or partially paid or career firefighters. It's across the entire state, and we're all struggling to address this problem.
Okay, if there's no further questions, go ahead, proceed. Oh, we got one more. Go ahead, Representative.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Gentlemen, to whoever wants it, what does it take? What are the requirements to be a volunteer firefighter? We're talking about maybe adding some benefits. Last year, we added $9 million to the retirement fund. What do you have to do to qualify to be a volunteer and to get some of these benefits?
Okay, gentlemen, you only have the rest of the afternoon, but take the time you need. Go ahead.
All right, I'll start, and maybe I'll pass it off a little bit. But so I can speak to my own fire department, which we follow a very similar model. So for Sublette County, when a new volunteer firefighter joins, they meet with me, they fill out an application, we do a background check, and then formally put them on our roster. And then we put them through a recruit academy. And every year we start our recruit academy in January. It lasts 6 months long. Every week the firefighters do a self-study assignment. They read a chapter out of a IFSTA training manual. And they every other week they give a Saturday up, and they go down and they perform the physical hands-on skills necessary to learn how to be a safe and effective firefighter, and very importantly, have a common operating picture in mind. When we respond to an incident, they should have a common expectation of, what their job is expected to be on that incident. So at the end of that recruit academy, they're going to be qualified as a structural firefighter. They're going to be qualified as a wildland firefighter. They're going to be qualified for hazardous materials response. They're going to be qualified as a first aid CPR, and they're going to be qualified in what's called NIMS ICS, National Incident Management System, Incident Command Structure, for working within a quasi-military organizational structure, and it's standardized across the country. So at the end of that, then now they're actually considered a full-fledged member of the fire department, of Sublette County's fire department. So now in order to maintain that position as a member, they have to respond to a minimum number of incidents. Our threshold is they have to respond to at least 25% of the emergency incidents that they've been paged to. But they also have to attend 50% of the trainings that we provide. And so there's a variety of ways that we achieve those thresholds, but those are the minimum standards to maintain your position on our roster.
Further answers, gentlemen? He covered it. Okay, question, Representative Ward.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Earlier, we heard that volunteer EMS means that you're on call. That's the volunteer part, but you're paid if you have to go out. Is that also true for firefighters?
Go ahead, Chief.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Ward, EMS is a little bit different in that regard. Most volunteer fire departments, now, again, we talk about everybody operates a little bit different. And I can speak a little bit to Uinta County. Yes, so some areas pay their volunteer firefighters by call. Some provide a stipend to attend a training. Again, using tools to try to recruit and retain in that, and like I said, then you have your career that pay full-time. But I would say for every fire department, there's many fire departments that the volunteers do not receive any monetary compensation. They might receive a T-shirt, might receive a dinner banquet once a year, an award banquet, and along those lines. But the compensation to the majority of the volunteer firefighters is very minimal across the board, and whereas EMS, a lot of EMS is structured a little bit different in terms of the monetary that they get per call, but every fire department does it a little bit different.
Thank you. Just a follow-up comment, because when we say volunteer, usually that means no compensation. So it's a bit confusing, the term volunteer, if they are getting some compensation. So thanks for clarifying.
Mr. Chairman, for a follow-up, Representative Ward. Yeah, for example, like, so a firefighter in Uintah County, if they're full-time and active, is making 200, if they come to all the trainings, is making $225 a quarter, $600 a year. And so but the number of hours that they put in, we're talking about pennies on the dollar. So we do use the term volunteer because the majority of what they're doing is volunteering their time, even though they might get some minor stipends. $600 a year for a full-time kind of involvement in the fire department, we still term just as a volunteer because of the level of compensation they're receiving is very minimal.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So the firefighters do get a pension or some kind of retirement, correct?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Ward. So yeah, yes and no. I mean, most fire departments across the state participate in either, for the full-time career, the Plan B paid fire pension, or the volunteer fire and EMT search and rescue pension plan. Now, whether the department pays those member contributions of $18.75 a month, or the volunteer firefighter has to pay that on their own, it varies across the board. Some departments pay that $18.75 a month for their volunteers. Other departments do not and require the volunteers, if they want to participate, to pay that themselves. And then we do have a handful of departments that do not provide that opportunity for their volunteers to participate. Why they wouldn't provide that, I'm not sure, but there are some out there that do not provide that at all. So across the board, there is an opportunity to be a member of either the Plan B paid fire for the career firefighters, or we have some firefighters across the state that are part of the big plan and that are not in Plan B, but are still firefighters. And then we have the volunteer fire EMT search and rescue pension plan.
I think it's worthwhile too, if somebody there can point out, if you worked as a firefighter for 20 or 30 or however many years, what can you expect to get from that pension at the time when you retire, just per month, just as a...
Mr. Chairman, are we talking volunteer?
Yes, sir.
So for a volunteer that puts in 20 years into the volunteer pension, or contributes for 20 years and is a firefighter for 20 years, you're right around the $350 to $400 a month, roughly.
Thank you for that. Mr. Applegate.
Mr. Chairman, to clarify that a little bit, if you got 20 years, you might be eligible for that $300 or $400 a month, but you don't get that till you're age 60. So you may go another 20 years before you get any of that. So it's certainly not a stipend that you can live on, and depend on it in your lifespan up until you're age 60. Then, like I say, then you'll receive it. So that's a lot of years that you put in there. Myself, I've been involved in the fire service this year, it'll be 48 years. And so I get a little bit more because I've been in there for longer, but yeah, it's age 60 waiting for that first check to come up. I get a lot of phone calls, saying, hey, I qualified, I get my pension now. So anyways, with that, I'll end.
With that, we don't talk age on this committee. Further questions, committee? Go ahead, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So in the broader, I know you haven't gotten maybe through all the list of things, but in the broader, are your volunteers eligible for workers' comp for injuries that they receive on a call? And then what about unemployment? Because they're employed somewhere else, most of them, but if they're hard on the job, are they eligible for unemployment based on now they can't work their other employment if they were injured? Thank you.
Go ahead, Chief Cooper.
I'll answer the question, Mr. Chairman. So in Sublette County, all of our firefighters are covered by workers' comp. We try very hard to make sure that they're safe and that they're not going to need to use that, but it does happen a couple times a year where they've had an injury and they receive workers' comp benefits to help them out with that. As far as unemployment, no, they're not. I mean, we don't lay off any firefighters. They won't receive unemployment benefits. There has been a couple of times where firefighters have been laid off from their primary place of employment, and the claim has come back to Sublette County, and we've refuted that and said that they're still a member of our fire department. They're still with us, and that we're not. The county doesn't want to contribute to that unemployment claim.
And I would add, there was a piece of legislation from this last year that talked about not just fire calls, but training, PR events, et cetera, were covered for workman's comp. It's an important piece. Go ahead, Mr. Quinney.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Barlow, just to add to what Chief Cooper said in terms of the volunteers, I believe most departments cover their volunteers with workman's comp insurance. But when I started my position in June of 2004, and in April of 2005, we had a fire in Evanston that killed 2 of my volunteer firefighters. And I worked through that process with them. Volunteer firefighters, as far as the benefits in terms of line of duty death, are eligible to receive the federal line of duty death benefit, which I believe now is about $330,000 to the family. But as far as workman's comp coverage of their injuries, one of the things that I discovered in terms of my experience with having to bury 2 firefighters is that workman's comp paid out 5 years of wages based on the employee's full-time job. So I had one that worked at the post office, for example, and they paid 5 years of wages out to the spouse based on his post office job and coverage to the family. So volunteers, when back to an earlier question about what requirement does it take to be a volunteer? First is just the desire, right? The desire to do it and to go through the training. But in terms of workman's comp and what happens when something bad happens, which it does, about 100 to 150 times a year across the country, that we have line of duty deaths for firefighters. And I think last year there was roughly about 110 firefighter line of duty deaths. About 44 of those were volunteers. But the workman's comp is a piece that comes in and does protect volunteers. So when they come in and we talk about, and the cancer legislation that this body passed a few years ago are good things to help people, encourage that, hey, you are putting your life on the line here. And if something does bad happen to you, there's these protections that helps. It's a good piece of the puzzle for sure. But getting people in the door and keeping them in the door for all that's being required is why we're here today for sure.
Another thing came to my mind when you were talking about that, just for the committee's benefit, is what it requires. Some of the things that these firefighters have to go on, it's not necessarily being killed in a fire, being burned or falling off a truck. It's the things that they see, and we'll talk about that in other committees as well. But the emotional and the mental trauma that those firefighters have to go through to go out on a car wreck on Interstate 80 on the Sisters is a big deal, and we've all been there for the firefighters. And that's a scar that firefighters maintain. I can't remember the saying that says, I wish my mind could forget what my eyes have seen, because it's a big deal. And that's something that we need to address, perhaps not on this committee right now, but it's something that is being addressed across the board, the mental health and well-being. But that's another, I've lost volunteers for that reason. because they just could not, they weren't strong enough to deal with that. And that's not a good thing or a bad thing. It's just a fact of life, and it's something that we do deal with. So that came to mind. I'm sorry to interrupt. If there's further questions. If not, go ahead. Oh, here's another one. Go ahead, Representative.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was looking in your survey, I'm not sure if these numbers are accurate, but total firefighters, 1,876, and volunteers, 1,400. I'm not sure if that's accurate statewide or if that's just the respondents of your survey. So what kind of numbers are we actually talking about with the total count of firefighters across the state? I don't know if you have those kind of numbers, but, and then what's the trend been over the last, I don't know, 10 years? Has it been increasing quite a bit? And part of my question is just asking because in Wyoming, we have limited resources if you're talking about people. I'm just curious what that trend is in the number of people over a various time period. Because, I mean, everybody could use more people, but sometimes we just don't have it, but so anyway, curious about that stuff.
Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman. Representative, to answer your question, the data on the form is just from the respondents, so that's the only thing I can answer to there. I do know that the state at various times has tried to conduct surveys and determine the total number of fire departments and total number of firefighters within the state. That's a pretty big lift to maintain year after year. I don't have any current relevant data to answer your question about the statewide actual numbers. That might be something we could look to one of the state agencies on or look to for future answer.
Senator Hutchins.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We're listening to a lot of data, and I know the main reason you're here is people just aren't volunteering. People just don't really care for each other anymore like we used to. And you want ideas to help you get people to volunteer. So you're coming to the state and say, we need help. What do you really want us to do? I'm having a hard time trying to think of how do I get someone to volunteer? And I think I asked you the last meeting, maybe it was you, what made you volunteer? And what made me volunteer? And Representative Trujillo and Senator Baldwin, I guess it was our love for each other and our desire to help. And we've become a community where you watch your neighbors, not in my case, because we all know each other, but they drive by, they go into their garage, the door goes down, you don't see them. And then in the morning, they open up the garage door, drive out, and you don't see them, you don't interact with them. So you don't get that real sense of, this is a real human, and something bad can happen to them, and would I be willing to be there for them? We have all this social media, and for me, seeing a firefighter in action, coming to the schools, K through 12, the universities, whatever, for these people today, you've kind of got to make it over the top exciting so they can get stimulated to want to help somebody. So you want us to help you with that. How are we supposed to do that? I don't know. So am I asking the wrong question? Because you want to know from me and I want to know from you.
And I think, Senator, some of the things that Chief Cooper's going to go through, address some of that, some of the further stuff he's got on his sheet here.
Good.
When we move him forward, if we
seen
allow,
those.
he'll give us some ideas.
Thank you.
There's a recruitment tool out there, and Mr. Quinney knows about it. It's called Cool Hats and T-shirts or something. The National Volunteer Fire Council puts out a movie. You remember the name of that? Cool T-shirts or cool hats and.
Yeah, just speaking, there's a new video that the National Volunteer, Mr. Chairman, partnered with John Deere to produce this new video about fire service. And obviously John Deere partnered because they feel like they're kind of the heartland of America, and they, the fire service and specifically the volunteer fire service spoke to what John Deere's mission is. And so they've produced this video that is coming out. It's about an hour and a half long. So when you talk about recruitment video, getting people to watch a video that's an hour and a half long talking about a particular topic, I think is a little bit rough. But there's certainly, like I said, this is a national problem with everybody needing to tackle this problem, right? And so I think to answer Senator Hutchins' question about what can we do, I think that's why we're here, and we're going to try to provide a list of these things and these ideas to hopefully to promote. So we need to do ideas at the local level. So we need to make it our training more exciting. We need to do things at the local level for sure. And then these ideas that we're bringing to you are things that need to be done at the state level. Because I think when Chief Cooper mentioned about the brainstorming in the committee, a lot of brainstorming ideas happened, and they took all the ones that need to be done at the local level, and we're going to work on those. And the ones that we're bringing you today are things that need to be addressed through legislation, which is what to help tackle. We're very appreciative of the volunteer fire and EMT pension plan, search and rescue pension plan. Very appreciative of the Plan B paid fire pension plan, and we won't talk about Plan A because that's been addressed and is hopefully going to move on to being successful for all those people that participated. But those are awesome tools that are in the toolbox. We just need to add more because the problem has become more complex and we need more tools to address it.
Very good. My stepdaughter bought me a T-shirt, Senator, that says "Still plays with fire trucks." That's my reason. Yeah. Okay, you have a follow-up?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, because it seems like it kind of stumped him, and I don't want to do that. But the hour-long video, I'm talking about the little YouTube videos I see, they're like a minute. You need to catch them. An hour is just way too long. Just a thought.
Here's the motivation. I'm sponsoring it at my theater in my town, so you get good popcorn when you watch that movie, so.
Woo!
Yeah. Okay, let's go ahead and let Chief Cooper proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Hutchins, I agree with what you said, and it was great comments, but a lot of what you said is going to be addressed by where I'm going with this. I do want to answer one question, though. I see volunteer firefighters that join my organization, and I always ask them, why are you here? Why do you want to join? What are you looking for from the organization? And I really do drill down. Like I don't accept generic answers when they sit down with me. And after some consideration, it's generally to help their neighbors. And if I had to paint one broad stroke to answer that question, that's exactly it. My volunteers, myself included, when I joined when I was 19 years old, it was because I wanted to be part of the solution, not part of the problem. I wanted to be there when somebody calls 911, they're having the worst day of their life, their house is on fire, they've been in a car wreck, whatever it is. I want to be part of the solution to help them have a better day. I want to be part of my community and be stronger in our community because of a difference that I can make and my fellow firefighters can make. And I do strongly believe today that that's the primary reason why people join still today, just as much as it was years ago. It's still a very valid reason and very true of our membership when they join. All right, so moving into the list of recommendations. As I'd mentioned, these recommendations are just brainstorming ideas at this point. We did try to weed out the ideas that are not legislative solutions, and today what I want to do is speak to that. But I do want to make a point, though. I did have a meeting with my own firefighters 2 weeks ago. And we did a similar thing, and I narrowed, I gave them side rails. What are the solutions that we can do within our organization at a local level? And we came up with 88 different ideas that we need to do within our own organization at a local level. But that's not what I'm here to talk to you about today. What I'd like to talk about is what we think could be legislative solutions that can be considered. And you'd mentioned one about maybe a exciting YouTube video, and that's actually the first one on the list here. We strongly think that a statewide marketing campaign could be beneficial. I certainly don't have the resources, in-house to, have a professional videographer that could, create that kind of an excitement video. But I do know there's resources within the state that probably could address that. And I've seen a few other fire departments that have put together similar types of videos that I think are pretty effective. But I think it's more than just, social media. I think there's opportunities for, billboards and newspapers and radio spots. And I think maybe a statewide marketing campaign might have some benefit to the Wyoming Fire Service and getting the word out. And then that's another thing that I've heard from our community is, boy, we didn't even know you were looking for volunteer firefighters. And so maybe this is something we can do, is to let our community know that we are looking, and I shouldn't say volunteer firefighter, I'm sorry, I represent volunteer firefighters, but this is a statewide issue, regardless, volunteer combination career. All fire departments need to address this and could equally benefit from a statewide marketing campaign. So that's one of the ideas that I think has a lot of value and potential to benefit the entire state, and something that maybe we could work together with our legislators to find a good solution for. There's still a lot of work that need to be done to take that from an idea to something we can implement, but it's a beginning, and that's where we want to start with you today. Is let's start recommending some solutions. So with a little attitude, I'll breeze through the rest of these, but please stop me, and you have this in front of you. If you have any of the sub bullets, if you want to ask me any questions or pause, please do. So the next one I wanted to talk about, the next major bullet, is a state government employee response policy. And during the LSO presentation, we briefly discussed that there was a leave, that I believe it was Virginia, where they gave 24 hours of paid leave for members of the volunteer fire department to respond to emergency incidents during working hours. I think there's some value in that, and I'll use a local anecdote. In Pinedale, where I live, I met with our town council, and I told them we're struggling for daytime response. A lot of times our volunteer firefighters, they work in the oil field or whatever it is, they're not available during daytime hours, and when we need to staff a truck, it's crickets sometimes, and it's real hard during those daytime hours. And our local town council had listened loud and clear, and they said, okay, what can we do to help? Can we encourage our town employees to become members of the volunteer fire department, and then allow them to respond during daytime hours? And that one action shifted my organization night and day, because just because of a forward-thinking town council and mayor, now suddenly we were able to staff our engines during those daytime hours, and it just made such a difference. The other thing that it did is it led by example for the rest of our community. And if our town council can do it, maybe the business members on Main Street, Pinedale, can do it as well. And so that's really where I think the value of this recommendation comes from, is maybe we can look to the state to put a well thought out policy in place for state employees to become members of the volunteer fire department, and then encourage them to not only join the fire department, but respond during daytime hours, and support them with some efforts. And then there was actually some recommendations in here that, I'm sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. I'll save that for another moment. But we did some research before we came to you, and there's currently some language in the state employees handbook that allows, I believe it's up to 16 hours of leave for personal use, but that's not specifically designed or defined for volunteer fire response. So maybe that would be a good first step, is to open that up and maybe look at that a little closer and see if there's any more we can do with that. My hope is that if we can do it with our state and adopt a policy, maybe we can go to the county and the municipalities and adopt a similar policy and lead by example, and then encourage our local businesses to continue that format. So hopefully there's something there to consider. Let me continue. Moving on to the next one, healthcare incentives. This one actually came from from a variety of sources, but when I first brought it up in my own fire department and said this is something we're considering, our local farmers and ranchers came to me immediately and said, boy, this is something we're really interested in. We can't afford healthcare. We can't afford, healthcare insurance. And boy, if there's something we could do to access, some sort of a group healthcare plan and be part of, we're on board. Tell us where we got to sign up and how can we push this idea further. And so within my own organization, I have many firefighters that are underinsured or not insured, and they're interested in the idea. I don't know how to take the idea and make it something that we implement. That's just beyond my wheelhouse. But I think it's a great idea, and it's the kind of thing that would actually bring volunteers to our door. And that's really the kind of things that I really want to focus on is how can we actually get people that are interested in helping their community incentivized enough that they actually, think it's worth the time to become a firefighter and they want to be part of it. And maybe healthcare is a big enough incentive that would encourage people that need it to come join the fire department. Here's another one that this one actually came from our own firefighters there in Sublette County. When I was asking them for ideas, they said, what if there was incentives for hunting and fishing licenses? And they said if there was preference points or some sort of a preference system, that if you're a volunteer firefighter, you get to the front of the line somehow, boy, they're signing up. And they said, tell me what I got to do, because I'm the first person in line there to figure out what that would be and be part of that. So that's exactly the kind of solutions that I think are kind of thinking out of the box. But that would be a huge benefit to me as a chief of the organization, is that there's people in my community in Sublette County that would value that immensely. And if that's what they got to do is give back to the community and be part of the volunteer fire department to have access to that kind of incentive, that makes a lot of sense. And I don't know how to implement it. I don't know what direction to go with it, but I can tell you that locally our own firefighters are pretty excited about that one, and all of them that I've been talking about. But that's one that really stuck to the volunteers that we talked to. Employer incentives, that's something that maybe we haven't discussed in the past, and I think that maybe there's an opportunity to work on, is we try real hard to provide incentives for the actual individual firefighters. Well, maybe there's a bigger market we can look at, and maybe there's a way we can incentivize the employers to encourage their employees to become volunteer firefighters, and even more so, allow them to respond, during working hours. And a good example that came to me was from Chief Coy there in Laramie County. He said that the Walmart distribution center gives time off to their volunteers, with pay. And he gave me the example. He said that even if there was a late night incident, the volunteers are out there at 2 o'clock in the morning, and they're exhausted from fighting a long fire all night, or a bad car wreck or whatever it is. They have some latitude to come in late the next day and just work a half day and still be compensated the following day. So those are the kind of examples that I think maybe we can look to our employers in the state. Well, what can we do legislatively? Well, the idea that came forward is can we work with the Wyoming Business Council or maybe with the SLIB board and look if there's incentives that we can do for people when they come to the state and ask for assistance. Maybe we can encourage them as employers to adopt policy that supports their local communities by encouraging volunteerism. And I think there's maybe an opportunity to look at.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to stop you on that idea because my employer, I'm sort of a volunteer, I do get compensated here, but I have a day job, which I'm not working today, I'm on vacation. This is my vacation. Anyway, they provide 3 volunteer days paid for us to do things like that. And so I'm wondering, that may be fairly common in the corporate world, maybe not so common in local employers in Wyoming. My point being that some businesses are already doing that, and probably the best place to bring that would be more to the Chamber of Commerce or the Business Association, because it's probably better that they do it voluntarily, like my employer does, rather than have it mandated by the state. So just a thought.
Comments and proceed.
I will comment. Just it wasn't the intent to be a mandate, just an incentive. Business tax incentives might be something to be considered. You know, again, looking at trying to incentivize the employers as well as the volunteers. One idea that came forward is workers' compensation. Maybe there's an opportunity to encourage the businesses by a break in their workers' compensation rates. I know that's established based on incidents and there's history that defines how that rate is established, but there may be an opportunity there for a reduction in cost to the business that hires firefighters that maybe have programs within the fire department that encourage, healthy lifestyles. We have incentives within my fire department that encourage our firefighters to stay physically fit and pass an annual physical exam and get a medical examination completed. And the intent is to try to, make sure that their health and well-being is first and foremost, and that they're able to be healthy to help us protect our communities. Maybe there's an opportunity there to give a break in for their regular full-time employees to address that. College education discount was one that was recommended. I think there's some maybe opportunities that we could work with our community colleges and the University of Wyoming to see if there's an opportunity to incentivize volunteer firefighters or all firefighters to pursue further education. State park access was another one that came up. Some of our firefighters thought it might be nice to have reduced rate or entrance into state parks, and that made sense. That's kind of a nice little thank you, pat on the back, in a way a recognition of what they do. Tax incentives was one that come up, and I understand that there's constitutional requirements, making sure that all taxpayers pay taxes equally, but maybe there's ways to address that in the form of rebates or I don't know how to do it, but one of the ideas that came forward from our our fire service was that is there any way to look at taxation that occurs and reduce that as an incentive to be part of your community. So tax incentives was one of the things that came up, and maybe it's not ad valorem tax. Maybe it's in the form of vehicle registration fees for motor vehicle registrations, or even the cost to get the license plates, or even the prestige license plates that the firefighters are very proud to put on their vehicles. Maybe there's a way that we can reduce that cost, or if we can't reduce it, maybe there's a way we can use some of that cost to go back into the program to help address the need for recruitment and retention in the state. And then moving on to our next one, water and sewer districts. So when I joined, I was 19 years old when I first joined the volunteer fire department. That was 28 years ago. We actually received free water and sewer as an incentive, and it was a nice thank you. And we didn't, because I lived within the town limits, I didn't have to pay for water and sewer at the time. And then a couple years later, it came to our administrators that look, that's a taxable event, and you need to claim that on your taxes. And it became kind of a problematic issue for our administrators to oversee that program. And eventually, it just kind of went away, just because of the the necessity to support that. So the reason why I bring it up is I think that maybe there's an opportunity there. It'd be hard to implement that, but it's something to look into. But the other thing I also wanted to bring up is really there's a lot of these incentives that might be taxable events that need to be tracked for the volunteer firefighters if they receive a benefit. And it's something to consider when we move forward with whatever the direction, if we move forward, is there a way to make sure that this doesn't become a burden in disguise? And so something to be aware of. And then the last one is the Wyoming retirement system, which you've heard a lot about. As a fire chief, I can attest that there are absolutely firefighters within my organization and on my roster that are still on the fire department because of this benefit. So it has absolutely been a retention incentive to retain the firefighters The way it's developed and provided to our volunteers, it's certainly not something that that you can rely on and make a retirement off of. And it's a small additional supplement to a retirement, but for a lot of our volunteers, that makes a huge difference, and they very much look forward to receiving that benefit, as Mr. Applegate had said earlier. And I know for a fact there's many of our own volunteer fire departments within our organization that remain on the rolls and continue to volunteer, for many years beyond when they would have maybe considered leaving earlier as a result of this benefit. So there's a lot of great opportunity there, and maybe there's something we can do to continue to enhance that program and continue to make that a great benefit. But we are so appreciative of the retirement system, and it just means the world to our volunteers, and we very much appreciate it.
Co-chairman, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Is there a maximum age to be a volunteer firefighter? When you reach a certain age, you're not allowed to participate? Or is there any threshold, or can someone decide to be 70 and still be a volunteer? And what happens? Does the fire chief of that district have to nicely say, probably not, or how does that work?
Mr. Chairman?
Go ahead, Chief. Careful, we're touching the age issue here.
So within my organization, there's no maximum. There is a minimum, but the way I look at it is anybody that wants to help their community and be part of the local fire department should have a place within the organization. And so my challenge as a chief is to try to make sure I use the right tools for the right job, and I want to make sure that I don't expose any of our firefighters to something that could potentially cause them harm. So the way I address that is we do an annual medical exam, and based on medical advice, we have a medical director that advises me that somebody might be at an increased risk of heart attack or stroke or whatever that might be, and recommends that we restrict the activity level of the firefighter to non-arduous and non-strenuous tasks. But so to answer your question, there's no maximum within the organization. We actually have one firefighter that's 79 years old that is very, very active and is a huge asset for the organization. Couldn't be happier to have him, and he just leads by example. We do have a minimum. My own organization, we set our minimum at 16 years old for cadet firefighters. It's a vocational education program. We work with a local high school and try to encourage firefighters to learn a skill set, but they don't actually, we restrict their activities very significantly, and then when they become 18 and then leave the high school setting, then we lift those restrictions, assuming that they're fully trained and qualified and capable to respond to incidents.
Further question? Oh, go ahead, Representative.
Thank you, gentlemen. So, sitting on this committee in my first year of service here, we've had highway patrols short 87 guys. We have 70 more snowplows than we have snowplow drivers, right? Nurses are short, National Guard short, police is short. When you look at this list, maybe not just for your organization, but for everybody, I mean, do you have a top 2 or 3 that you think these would be most beneficial to helping maybe recruit people not to only your service, but some of these other services that are facing the same thing in Wyoming?
Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, just want to make sure I understand. So are you asking of the list of recommendations would be my, so, what's that? Yeah. So when I presented the information to you, I took the latitude to prioritize them according to my preferences. And so but those are my personal preferences. I haven't taken a straw vote among the Wyoming Fire Service and said, hey, what's the most important to you? Or so I can't say that I speak for the Wyoming Fire Service and what's the most important of these recommendations. What I can say is that a statewide marketing campaign makes a lot of sense, and it's something that I would really get behind. I think the employee response policy makes a lot of sense. It's something I think is something we can achieve with minimal cost. The healthcare incentives, that one's really important to me because I think that's the kind of thing that's actually going to draw firefighters to the doors and encourage them to join the volunteer fire department. The hunting and fishing licenses. So if you ask me to prioritize the first 5, it's the first 5 that I presented to you.
Further questions, committee? Seeing none. Oh, there we go. Representative Warnock.
Thank you. So I'm not sure if there's a question here, but more comment. but you can comment afterwards, I guess. I do appreciate what you've done here. You know, a lot of the things that we hear, people just come and say, we need more money, we need more money, we need more money. And that's not what this is. It's actually it seems like there's been time put in to figure some things out. Some of the, I think one of the problems that we would have with a few of these is, you know, we're not necessarily allowed to create a special class of citizen, even if they are serving. So there are some difficulties with some of these because of that, just constitutionally. But, you know, I appreciate what you've done with this, and it's interesting that you mentioned how effective it was when you went to a specific city council, and that the word got out that it seemed like there was a missing link between people even knowing that there was a need for volunteer firefighters. So, you know, and you prioritize that at the top. So I find that very interesting, but I don't know if there's really a question in there, but just more of a
Just say,
comment.
wouldn't you agree?
Wouldn't you agree?
Senator Barlow.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think this actually picks up on that and goes maybe to what I want to understand is, it's an essential fire, we've said fire service is an essential service in this state. We're having the conversation this morning about adding EMS to that, whatever that list is. So who is responsible to provide that essential service in the state of Wyoming? What government, if we've said it as a state legislature, the law of the state says this is an essential service, and we're relying basically on a volunteer system, who is actually responsible for providing that service in the state of Wyoming right now? Thank you.
Whoever wants to address that. Mr. Quinn.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Barlow, so by state law, the municipalities are required to provide fire protection. So cities and towns are the ones required to provide fire protection within their municipalities by law. Those are the only ones. Counties are not required by law to necessarily provide fire protection as an essential service, but according to Wyoming state statute, cities and towns are required to provide that essential service.
Further questions, committee? Oh, Representative Ward. Oh, you guys got to jump up and down higher. I can't see you. I'm sorry.
That would be
Senator Hutchins, go
embarrassing.
ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I like these ideas. And along with the representative from House District 42, Representative Hornock, the legislator is prohibited from making special and local laws. And I'm just wondering, with all these wonderful ideas, have you gone to the businesses, the schools, and said, hey, would you like to participate in this? Have you started there, or are these just your ideas and you're just telling us about them?
Gentlemen.
Mr. Chairman. Thank you. Mr. Chairman. Senator Hutchins, as I'd mentioned, in my own organization, we brainstormed a list and we came up with 88 ideas. Some of these ideas overlap that can be implemented at a variety of different governments and private entities. And so the ideas that I presented today are ones that we, our committee, believe have a legislative opportunity to address. I'm not saying that they can't also be addressed at a county or municipal level or with churches or schools or wherever that may be. But those responsibilities I leave with the individual fire chiefs, and I can assure you that we are doing that, and that's a big part of our jobs is to recruit and retain members, and we put a tremendous. It's probably the single most taxing responsibility that I put the majority of my time into as a chief is figuring out how to implement these recommendations at a local level.
Mr. Co-Chairman, go ahead, sir.
Thanks. What's the average time commitment? Or, I mean, is this 2 days a month you ask a volunteer? I know it's got to vary a little bit, because I'm looking through some of your proposals saying, what can the state do? how many hours a week or a month does the quote-unquote average volunteer firefighter contribute?
Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, it varies so wildly that I wouldn't be able to answer your question. Even within my own organization, it varies extremely from the availability of the volunteer. So some volunteers have very minimal time that they can contribute, but they still are very active, and some volunteers have much more time available that they can contribute. We have minimum thresholds, but the minimum thresholds in Sublette County may be different than the minimums in our neighboring jurisdictions. And so I can't answer your question with an average or a minimum, or other than tell you what our minimums are, but.
Well, if I could follow, let me try to dig a little bit more. So a lot of your recommendations, ideas have some type of either, stipend, incentive, discount, but to do some of those, we would probably, as a government, if any of these are feasible, require some mandatory minimum length of service, whether that's in years, whether that's in how much a month. So perhaps your perspective to be an active volunteer firefighter, what should that commitment be? I mean, what would you tell a new cadet recruit saying, hey, you're joining us, I know you're busy, but the average person, or our expectation is we want you in here a day a week, 2 days a month. I'm trying to fish for something as I'm going to make a couple motions to try to help you. I need to have some information on how to base them, I guess, is what I'm asking.
Chief, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, locally, we adopted policy that mandated that the firefighters respond to 25% of the emergency incidents and 50% of the trainings. And where we base that off of was existing state statutes, the definitions of firefighters that come from the presumptive legislation and from the volunteer fire pension legislation.
Can I have one more? This is what it feels like. So there are thresholds for the volunteer firefighter pension to be enrolled. What are those? I'm trying to find any benchmark anywhere you have that I can start from. So help me. What is the thresholds to be enrolled in the volunteer firefighter pension program?
Mr. Applegate.
Mr. Chairman, the basics of it is most departments have a minimum of 12 meetings per year. And so it requires at least 50% of those. I would guess that trying to figure out how much time. So what you have is you have, and it's like I say, it's in statute that you guys should have a booklet or you're about to get one. But that you got to attend at least 50% of your meetings. And with that said, that's just talking about the time you have going to a meeting. That doesn't count for all the times that you're responding to a call. It may be 30 minutes. It could be an all-nighter. You don't know. It could be literally 10, 12. You could spend a day and a half out there. It depends on what type of a fire it is. If it's a haystack fire, if you guys ever been on one of them, you know it's going to be a while. You're going to be out there a day and a half easily trying to put out a haystack fire. It just burns forever. But yeah, for the actual meetings itself, probably most of them are minimum 2 a month. But others go at least once a week. It's not uncommon. They'll have training meetings, business meetings, equipment check, and it goes on, and so they have quite a few meetings. And like I say, that's probably the least amount as opposed to the time that they spend out on actual calls.
Thank you.
And I would add that just from my own perspective, and that would be 50% of trainings and 25% of response is a good benchmark. At least in my department, that's a good benchmark, perhaps somewhere to start. Mr. Applegate, finger up.
Mr. Chairman, I'll just say from my department I came from when I got on back in the old days, back in 75, you had to attend 50% of the meetings and 50% of the calls. And it's still that way today. So when Shad said it's all over, it is. It's literally all over. Every community's got their, their own recommendations and requirements.
And I would add, I'm missing a meeting by being here today, so I won't get this attention. Okay. Representative, somebody over here had a. You changed your mind, okay. Further questions, committee? Senator Bouchard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In the business world, what we see is job fairs, and sometimes every 30 days. In the term of government, they can get free advertising. I mean, the radio stations will run free ads. I mean, in both of your respective counties, how many job fairs have you done, to do, just introduce it to the public to say, hey, we're going to be out at so-and-so location, come by and see if you'd like to be involved. I mean, that's stuff that doesn't really cost a lot of money. And it would maybe start a fire in people to volunteer. I mean, how many of those do we do a year?
Go ahead, Chief.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Senator Bouchard. So again, I can speak to my own organization. So last year we went to 4 different community career fairs. And we staffed a booth and we meet and greet with the interested people as they come in. We've tried to do them in the high school. Anytime we see an opportunity to interface with the public, we do it during Rendezvous. We do it during any major community event. We staff a booth, a specific recruitment booth with volunteer firefighters that are giving up their time. They're volunteering their time to be there. We have a sign-up slip and a big board, a big banner in front of the table that says volunteers are needed, please come sign up. And then we actually, we encourage our firefighters to go out and shake a hand and answer questions and try to engage the community and let them know that we need volunteers. It's a big part of what we do.
Thank you, and I will tip my hand on that I may make a motion down the road at the end of the day that we assist Mr. Matthews, who's sitting back there smiling because he doesn't have to talk, that we assist him and Mr. Quinney in making not an hour and a half video, but a shorter video for the departments to use, for job fairs, for healthcare day, whatever, at the high school. That will be a proposal that I will possibly make. Mr. Quinney, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Bouchard, you're exactly right in terms of every department needs to do local work. There's no doubt about that. We're here today to represent the Wyoming Fire Service, especially a lot of those departments that are out there that maybe 100% volunteer. The chief is working or seeing patients all day long, and their ability to get out and do some of that stuff is limited. And so we're here to represent the entire Wyoming Fire Service as a whole with some of these ideas. But what we're presenting you today does not take away at all from the fact that this has to be a local effort, to the local departments. Some statewide advertising campaign is not going to do much if the local people and our local people, we're not putting in the work at these job fairs to supplement those things. And we're just asking for these ideas are going to be adding tools to the toolbox to help draw people in. But we've got to be the ones at the local job fairs to draw that, say, hey, this is an incentive that we have that the state legislature has helped us out with, and those types of things in these ideas, because none of these ideas are just going to magically get firefighters through the door to join the fire department. They got to want to, fire departments, long time ago, we're social clubs. It was go down to the fire station and play cards and it's a social club for the guys. And you look at a lot of those social clubs, the Elks and the Lions clubs and those types of things are kind of dying, so to speak. And it's okay if a community might lose an Elks club or a Lions club. It's not okay if a community loses a fire department. And so that's what we're trying to keep everything above water here. And so as we talk to you today is no doubt about it, the local fire departments have to do the work and go out and get these people through the door. We're just asking for tools to help them to the carrots to help us draw these people to us and get them in the door and then to stay.
Okay, Representative Penn, I knew you'd come up with that. Go
I'm
ahead.
working on it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I think, you know, was mentioned by Senator Hutchins that our younger generation, our younger populations have to be kind of wowed and lulled, and, you know, it has to be made exciting, where previously it was more of kind of a, I don't know if good old boys club is the right term, but something that, like you said, you get together and play cards and it's the camaraderie and such. And so this I like the idea of the marketing. This might just be that we need to change, we need to update the way that this is being marketed. In this first one, you mention or say that the marketing campaign could be maintained by the Wyoming Department of Fire Prevention and Electrical Safety. How big of a department is that? Do they have marketing already? I just today received a picture of an ad in several of our local newspapers. That's an entire half-page ad, the whole thing, by one of our departments that was speaking to us first thing this morning, and it's blank except for at the bottom. Basically, it says get your vaccines. And so, I mean, obviously that's a big budget to put those kinds of ads out in our local papers. And so what do you already have? Is there something that's already occurring, or is this something that's would be new?
Go ahead, Director.
Mr. Chairman, to Representative Penn, Byron Matthews, Wyoming State Fire Marshal. So I have a rather small staff of about 50 folks across this great state. I do not have a marketing staff. That's not to say we can't perform the task. We can't partner with some of our other friends in state government, but specifically, no, I don't have those people in place. I think what they ask and what the conversation is from the Wyoming Fire Service is, you all help us help them. So from our standpoint, I think it's a great place to have that housed. I think we can also partner with Director Cooley. Obviously, they have some great things at Workforce Services. I think there's some great opportunities to partner and build on this, but it's that empowerment. And if I may, Mr. Chairman, I'll answer a couple quick questions. Your rough number of firefighters is approximately 4,500 in the great state of Wyoming and approximately 140 departments. And I emphasize the word approximate because some of those numbers they're a little tough to firm up, but that clarifies that as well.
Sir, can you tell us how many of those, that 4,000 are volunteer? How many are paid?
The number we're running with is approximately 3,900 of those firefighters would be volunteer, approximately 600 in the career paid combination ranks.
Very good. Senator Hutchins.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, going back to our advertising and marketing, what little I know, this little thing here, YouTube, TikTok, all these seconds, you could flood the video or the system with videos, 1 minute, 2 minutes, catching their attention with firefighter information. You don't have to pay a big marketing company. You guys can just go out and there's a fire. Show someone you guys putting out a fire for a minute and rescuing someone for a minute. And that's advertising, and it's not, I don't think it's expensive. Just a thought.
Any thoughts, gentlemen, comments? I will tell you that the one gentleman at the end of the table, his department puts out a lot of pictures and publicity, and I look and say, they're my neighbor to the south. I look and see what they're up to every day. Go ahead, Chad.
Mr. Chairman, we do put a significant amount of effort into our social media and marketing and trying to get the message out to our community. We do, videos and every time we're engaged, we try to post something and have a presence in our community.
Pretty good. Representative Yen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, sorry, my head's still kind of thinking about this job fair prospect. So I see my volunteer firefighters all the time. They run community events themselves, and they go to other community events. They have booths. That's great. But do you guys actually go to job fairs? Because job fairs seems like one of the harder places to get volunteers. Is it still useful to go to job fairs, actually, for recruiting volunteers?
Chief Cooper, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, as I mentioned, Sublette County went to 4 different job fairs last year. But to your further question, minimal effectiveness. The people are looking for jobs, they're not looking for volunteer opportunities. Where we did have a little more impact was there was a high school job fair for prospective seniors looking to enter the workplace, and we were trying to encourage them to consider the fire service as a whole. We try to market ourselves as a stepping platform for somebody that wants to eventually become a career firefighter. They might start as a volunteer firefighter, obtain some necessary education, qualifications, experience, and then be more able to interview with the career fire department eventually. And so we do actively, go to job and career fairs and try to engage. I can't speak for every fire department, but I can tell you that we do.
Okay. Further comments, gentlemen, for the things you want to add before we let you escape those hot chairs?
Mr. Chairman, with a moment of privilege, would you mind if I introduce the committee that helped put this together? I don't want to, take the limelight here, but there's a lot of people who put a lot of work into presenting this information.
I think that's very appropriate. Make them stand up when you introduce them, please.
Not with us today. Mike Vogt, Chief of Alpine Fire Department, and Bob Glasson, Chief of Wheatland Fire Department. We're also on the committee that were able to put this information together. But beyond that, we reached out to the entire Wyoming Fire Service to solicit ideas and provide input for today. We really spent a lot of time and effort trying to present as much information that we thought would be beneficial to you today.
Mr. Co-Chairman.
Thanks. And abstract question, but with the 4 of you up there, I bet one of you knows the answer. We have 5 professional firefighting organizations in the state of Wyoming. Is it 5, right? Or Mr. Applegate, go ahead. Or if I can, Mr. Co-Chair.
You can, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Vice Chair,
Co-Chair.
every fireman in the state of Wyoming are professional. Now, you do have 5 full-time career fire departments.
Thank you, Mr. Applegate.
So,
Well spoken.
So my question.
which is Laramie, Cheyenne, Sheridan, Casper, and Rock Springs. And then there's some that are partial.
So my question is, if you have these other municipalities, are large, have there been conversations in the last 10 years of any of them going to what was the term you used? Not professional.
Career.
A career fire. But I guess I'm trying to get at is fire service is an essential service, right? We need firefighters in every community. Are any municipalities stepping up to say, it's gotten so bad and so difficult, it's time we look at going to a career, municipal career fire service full-time in our communities? Any discussion lately of any communities thinking about taking that step, that it's gotten that bad yet, that you know of?
Go ahead.
As we speak anecdotally, Mr. Chairman, I think the opportunity there is everyone looks at that. However, at the end of the day, firefighting becomes a very expensive essential service. So as we pay for equipment, as those departments continue to maintain that equipment and certification, then if you add a wage component, you may reach a threshold where that money is not sustainable to sustain the equipment and the staffing. One of the things we worked with your body on was special districts reporting requirements. Some of those districts don't even have the money to meet those reporting requirements. So to that, the problem may be that significant. However, the finances do not match that. So they're adapting and overcoming. And as these gentlemen have spoke to, and everyone in the room behind us can speak to, they are doing far more with way less. So that time is likely coming in the future. However, these good groups are doing strong work today valuable work today with far less resource than what they had. So when they come with this ask, I think it's that opportunity to say, hey, we need the people now at a lower cost to the constituent.
Go ahead,
So
Mr.
do you know,
Torres.
are there any communities that have like a one or two full-time paid people who coordinate the volunteer? How many type community, I mean, is that, we're talking 3, are we talking 20? I guess I'm trying to think, there are full-time people who are professionally employed to coordinate the volunteers, as I'm still trying to figure out what type of incentives to kind of beef up, and what does that look like? How does it work? Any more information on that I didn't hear today would be great.
Mr. Quinney.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Sonitzer. So there's many departments that across the state of Wyoming that operate what we call a combination department, right? So for example, Uintah County, we have 5 full-time paid staff. I'm included in the paid staff, and a total of 102 volunteers. There's many combinations. I can go through the list in terms of where you have full-time, like maybe the chief is full-time, chief is part-time, and a combination, a mixture of both. Like, Representative Yin and from Jackson Hole Fire and EMS, combination department, Campbell County, combination departments. There's a lot of departments that are combination. So I would say we're probably in the 30 to 40-ish, maybe not quite that, maybe 30-ish range in departments that are combination across the state. And then you have a bunch that are small and just all volunteer across the board. So, 5 full-time, like you said, probably I would say in the 30 to 35 range in combination, and then the rest all volunteer. And including the fire brigades, in terms of departments, some we have, like at Sinclair Oil, there's a fire brigade department. Those would be all full-time people that work at the plant, but are also on the fire brigade. So there's some of those numbers in that mix too that aren't really volunteer, but they're not considered a full-time fire department because they're just part of a fire brigade while they're at their full-time jobs.
Pretty much anything you can conceive in your brain, we have it. I know like Rollins is paid engineers and paid chief, and the rest are volunteers. Okay, further questions? Oh, go ahead, Representative Horlock.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Is there a organized labor component to the firefighters across the state, a union component, and do they also provide, and how prevalent is that among the firefighters and the volunteers? And then do they also provide some help and some assistance with recruitment throughout the state?
I think that Kevin should have to come up to the table now. You're the next contestant. Introduce yourself and go ahead and address that question if you would.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Kevin Reddy. I'm the president of the Federated Firefighters of Wyoming. I represent 9 International Association of Firefighter Locals across the state. We have 6 career full-time departments and 3 combination departments that are within the Federated Firefighters of Wyoming. Organized labor does work heavily to help our employers recruit applicants for the fire service, if that answers your question, Representative.
Okay, further questions? Well, he got off the hook quite easily. Okay, gentlemen, anything else you'd like to tell us?
Thank you for listening.
Mr. Chairman, that was exactly what I was going to say. Thank you very much for your time, for listening to us today. We sincerely appreciate the discussion. Thank you to the members of the Wyoming Fire Service that were here today to show support, and just we want to continue to work with you and continue to have this dialogue. We're here to help, and just let us know what we can do to be a good partner.
Very good. Don't go far. We'll have more discussion when we get to the end. Okay, next on my list, if everybody has the same list, I see Wyoming Forestry Division. You guys have been excited to get up here, right?
Everybody else needed a break, because I don't know if you're going to make it, everyone else needs to.
Actually, at the completion of this one, committee, we will take a break. So, gentlemen, introduce yourself and go ahead and present to us.
Mr. Chairman, Jared DeLay, Assistant State Forester, Fire Management Officer, Forestry Division, Wyoming State Lands and Investments.
And I'm, Mr. Chairman, Christopher Fallbeck, Wyoming State Forestry Division. I'm the Assistant State Fire Management Officer.
Mr. Chairman, State Forestry, we're a fairly small division. We have 50 full-time employees, and of that, 3 are full-time fire people or have fire as their primary job. We're also made up of a helitack program with the state helicopter out of the Duncan Helibase, our single engine air tanker program based out of here, Casper at the airport, our forestry conservation program up in Newcastle. And else we have, we can staff 4 engines when needed. And I'll turn it over to Mr. Fallbeck.
Mr. Chairman, just to expand a little bit on that, as far as our helicopter program, in essence, as far as our retention and recruitment goes for primary firefighters, that is our location of our only seasonal employees that we have. We currently are allocated 4 position TPOs. As far as the recruitment and retention for those individuals, the incentives in which we try to make sure that they return, which we usually get a helicopter crew member for an average of 3 seasons before they move on to their next endeavor. But the incentives that we have is it's a wildland firefighting program, which we do compensate them with overtime, as well as we provide housing at our current base location. And to help encourage these individuals to return, we send them to a litany of training to forward their fire career, as well as offer financial compensation or a pay increase when returning the following season.
I have a quick question for you before you go further. On your helitack positions, a couple of things I'd be interested in knowing. The missions that you perform in the season, in the summer, where do they expand across the state? And number 2 would be in competition with your federal partners who have helitacks around the state as well. Do you lose crew members to the federal programs? Do you gain from the federal programs? Or how does that work? Do you lose people? And
Mr. Chairman, yes, we kind of feel like we're a training ground for some of our other federal agencies, as well as other county and other states as well. Our program is a statewide asset, all 4 corners of the state. The other programs that are currently co-located in the state, the Rollins BLM has an aircraft that's similar to ours, and then the Teton Interagency Helitack, they have 2 aircraft out of Jackson Airport. The other neighboring ones, which we share with and train with, are Black Hills, and Arapahoe Roosevelt National Forest has one in Fort Collins.
just a quick follow-up question, what aircraft do you use?
Our current contract, which we've had, this most recent RFP that went out, was awarded to the same aircraft company that we had for the previous 3 years, which is a Bell 407 high performance.
Thank you. Go ahead and proceed.
Kind of looking at the topic and the previous speakers, I think it's probably best I put together the list of information that you see here, more as the talking points if there are questions regarding our programs. The other thing that I'd like to point out is that our single engine air tanker program going into its 4th season, we have never had dedicated staff for that program. We have relied very heavily on the BLM out of Casper here to help staff for the first few years of the program. That individual that was in a management role for that left to take another position, which left us in a little bit of a lurch last year, and brokered a deal with the Minnesota DNR, who covered our staffing for the entire season. A pretty unique program, state contracted aircraft, a BLM facility, and managed and run on a daily basis by another state agency, all under our contract in cooperation and did good work. The other honor conservation program that Mr. DeLay had mentioned earlier, it's still not a primary role for fire. However, in the summer season, it is number one on their priority, but it is not what they do year-round. Our only full-time employee that I have that's dedicated to fire is the day-to-day program manager or supervisor of the helicopter program. Some of the roadblocks and hurdles that we encounter, I think, are being competitive with our federal and other state agencies as far as wages. Our current organization does not allow the upward mobility for fire within our organization. In essence, from our one full-time person who is my direct report, I'm a direct report to Mr. DeLay. So there's the 3 tiers within our organization. And as far as seasonals, entry-level positions are not necessarily set up to provide strictly for fire. It's a collaborative duty or secondary duty. The other interesting thing is the applicant pool. We've heard a lot about how do we get these people to come out of the woods and help fight our fires and join our departments and our divisions. An interesting point, this year's hiring process for our seasonal crew members, I had over 1,800 hits on our state website for the job announcement, ended up with 36 total applicants. Half of those had no fire experience, and the other half had no aircraft experience. So I'm starting fresh again this season with 2 people, 1 returning from last year, and then I lost my former full-time employee to the Casper BLM as a fuels position because of the rigors and the time and the toll it takes on an individual to perform that duty. I was lucky enough to get someone who had been with us for 4 years to apply, and he was awarded the position. I think as we look for some solutions to this problem, we look at, I'm not going to be the person that says we need money because I don't know if that is a solution. We're looking for increased staffing. Is that a potential or is that part of the problem? If we open up positions and there aren't anybody to fill them, is that part of the solution? Is it seasonals? Is it AWACS? Is it full-time employees? And currently within our structure, as I mentioned before, we're not in a position to receive new positions and be functional without putting unnecessary burdens and excess workload onto leadership. The other suggestion in a dwindling workforce is to, and this is a question, it's not even a potential solution as far as I know, is the opportunity to contract fire suppression. Other states do this. They contract with private entities to do response. As a member of state forestry for the past 24 years, I take great pride in being part of that response and not sure if that is the way to go, but without getting applicants to apply for these positions, it needs to be talked about.
Questions, gentlemen, for State Forestry? Senator Barlow.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So just to be clear, you're housed in the Office of State Lands, State Forestry. So what is your primary responding to, just state lands, or do you have secondary and tertiary responsibilities? Thank you.
Right now, we primarily cover state trust lands, but we also assist with our cooperators in the room and our federal partners as well. So the 3.5 million acres of state lands and the 29 million acres of private lands, and then and we can assist with the federal lands.
Follow up.
As a follow-up then, funding source is obviously general fund, and then you probably reimbursed when you're on a federal fire or your cooperating agency. Is that accurate? Thank you.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Senator Barlow, that's correct. And then we also have, for preparedness, we supplement that with some federal grant money as well.
Go ahead, Representative.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Chair. So when I was with State Forestry for the state of New Mexico, we used to contract out to, way back in the country, pumper trucks and other. So does Wyoming not do that?
Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Trujillo, sorry.
You're good.
We do have the federal excess property program that we do get excess property from the federal Forest Service and distribute that out to the counties as well.
So they have follow-up?
Go ahead.
So there's ranchers out there, or business owners that have trucks that you can contract out that will help you?
They wouldn't necessarily be contract. They're part of the volunteer fire service. They're part of that kind of program, I guess. I think across the state, there's just roughly 300 pieces of equipment of that way. And I think there's an inventory of like $12.5 million of those trucks.
Okay, thanks.
Further questions, committee? And I would just add to that, and then it maybe goes without saying, there's a lot of agreements for mutual aid across the state with city, county, BLM, Forest Service, et cetera, where we respond to each other's fires to initial start, and then it's up to the owning agency to proceed from that. One quick question for you, just to enlightenment of the committee. Can you tell us the per hour cost on that Bell 407 without crew, just the helicopter?
The daily availability, Mr. Chairman, the daily availability for this year for that helicopter to have it sit unstaffed, not doing anything, but ready for response within 10 minutes is $2,800 a day. And every hour physically off the earth, it gets $1,400 an hour.
I think that's an important thing to remember. Off the earth, I like that term. Thank you. Further questions, comments? Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, I guess I'd be remiss if I didn't say, with our suppression efforts, we rely heavily on our cooperators, our partners in the room, and then also our federal partners as well.
Very good. Thank you. Further questions, committee? Seeing none. Thank you very much. Next, we'd like to hear from the Wyoming Retirement System. I like the way you work. Make them come up. Yeah. I threatened Mr. Quinney at lunchtime that he was going to have to talk more today. So go ahead and introduce yourself and go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, my name is David Swindell. I'm the Executive Director of the Wyoming Retirement System. On your dais, it says Executive Director or Designate. Well, I designated myself because of the importance of this topic. There's been a lot of talk about the volunteer pension system in the previous testimony. I'm listening in the back. Chairman, you've assembled a great committee here. And there were really good questions, and I would have to say there were really good answers. You don't have to unlearn anything. My purpose here today is perhaps to fill in any additional details about how the pension system works for the volunteers, or anything else that's on your mind or the committee's mind. Again, just as a reminder, how all this fits into the big picture. The Wyoming Retirement System is the public retirement system for all public employees in the state of Wyoming. It's not just state employees, it's cities, it's towns, it's counties. Our biggest population is K through 12 education. We paid out last year $740 million in benefits, 78% of which stayed in the state of Wyoming. 71.5 million of that came to Natrona County, where we are assembled here this afternoon. That's not an insignificant payroll. Natrona County is a little bigger places than some places think of in Wyoming. But Representative Penn, when I grew up in Riverton and Fremont County, as you know, it's not the richest place in the state, but 41 million went to Fremont County last year. That was 3% of Fremont County income. It's one of the larger employers, if you will, in Fremont County, and so on. It's a $10 billion pension system. We administer 8 defined benefit plans, one of which is the plan for volunteer firefighters, EMTs, and search and rescue personnel. It's only about $100 million in assets, so it's kind of like 1%, really is. There's a lot of talk in the news about how bad the 1% is, but sometimes the 1% is the good 1%, and this is the good 1%. Of that, all that money that is being paid out, in the end, 70% of a pension is paid out by investment earnings. It's not employee contributions, it's not employer contributions, it's investment earnings. And we don't get any general fund money. It's all employee contributions, and investment earnings. But of course, that's not really quite right. It's government, so it's a little more complicated than that, because the state of Wyoming does provide tax support to the volunteer fund. That is in the form of the 60% of the fire insurance premium tax. And that money could go, and at times has gone, to the general fund. So it's a general fund tax revenue. So when we say we just rely solely on earnings and contributions, well, that's not quite true for this fund, just so you know. There's a few fact sheets. I put together a fact sheet for you. Most of this has already been discussed. I won't spend a lot of time on it. But we do have about 2,400 volunteers from 117 agencies that are enrolled in the volunteer fund. That includes a number of emergency medical technicians and some search and rescue people, but the bulk, are about 2,000 of those, are volunteer firefighters. We have about 1,700 pensioners, 1,390 retirees, and 292 surviving spouses. The average benefit is $385 a month, with 20.6 years of service. I was mentioned about $350 for 20 years of service. Yeah, that's exactly correct. And there's a little table in the fancy book that's I laid at your dais that has a little table. You can take a look at that. We are trying to push these things because we're moving and our address is changing, and we're trying to use these things up. Eligibility is age 60 with 5 years of service. So you have to serve 5 years to be vested and eligible for an annuity that you can then draw at age 60. And there is a pre-retirement spousal benefit if we lose a volunteer. It's one of the things about a pension. There are some disability and death benefits that are different than, say, a 401k. And there's a post-retirement spousal benefit. They get 2/3 of the pension for the rest of their life. There's a note on the member contributions. And mostly, I think, Mr. Chairman, about funding status and some recent legislation. This body is to be commended for its support of this plan. They do commit to 60% of the fire insurance premium tax. That's about $3 million a year flow to support this program. And but there has been a little bit of a tennis ball. Some of that money, it used to be 100% at one point. The fund lost $2 million a year as part of the Fire A solution. Eric had to bring up Fire A. Thank you very much. It's a difficult topic. Appreciate the legislature's support. It was necessary to do that as part of that solution. But it did set back the volunteer fund a little bit. They were still going to be okay, but it put them back from full funding. The legislature put in a $9 million lump sum contribution in this year's legislation. It'll arrive 1 July, and it does kind of repair and put that fund mostly back on previous track, so that's good. So where are we at on funding status, and what does funding status really mean for any of the pensions? Well, what the we're going to play a little minor actuary here. You have the assets of the system, and that's pretty easy. That's the market value of the assets. And there's sometimes we actuarially smooth the investment results, but okay, that's how much money you have. What are your liabilities? Because the funding ratio is simply the ratio of your assets to your liabilities. Well, the actuaries estimate the present value of the liabilities. And you can think of it this way. If I owe a dollar in a pension payment 1 year from now, do I need to have a dollar on hand to pay it? Well, it depends on what I can earn on it in the meantime. So some simple math. Suppose that I owe a dollar to Senator Hutchings a year from now. If I can earn, I'll use 10% rate of return because the math's easy. Even this retired soldier can do it. If I have 92 cents on hand, actually 91 cents on hand, I'll earn 10% on it. A year later, I'm going to have just over a dollar. So I can be fully funded for that $1 liability if I have 91 cents on hand. And the same thing if I owe a dollar 2 years from now. I need about 82.6% because I'll earn 10% for 2 years and I'll have the dollar that I need. And so for a pension that's going to pay, we're going to pay Senator Hutchins for 2 years. And I'm going to pay $1 here and $1 there. I need $1.74 roughly if I'm going to earn 10%. And if I had $1.74 and I had that liability, I'd be fully funded. That's how it works. And of course, we don't use 10%. That's a pretty big rate of return. The system's discount rate is 6.8%. That was what we think is a long-term average that we can get out of the investment markets in a diversified global investment fund. And the liabilities become a little tricky to estimate. Now, if I have a retiree, we know what their pension is, and we know how old they are, and the actuaries are actually very good for a large population of estimating exactly how long that population is going to live. That's pretty tight. And then for the people that aren't retired yet, but they're close, say within 5 years, we have a very good idea of what when they're going to retire and what their benefit's going to be. 10 years out, still pretty tight. It gets a little softer, to use analyst terms, Mr. Chairman, for a 20-year-old that's just entering the system. At the same time, we have pretty good history on it, and that can be a little soft because they don't have much, we haven't accrued much liability for that young person yet, right? So it doesn't matter so much. In the end, so you get the present value of the liabilities to the value of the assets, and that's the funding ratio. This fund is rated right now, was rated at 81.3. I haven't got the final results yet. They should be due in from the actuaries like this week. I think we're going to be at about 83% funding. And in your handout, there's an estimate in the table that's laid out there. We think we're going to be 100% funded by 1 January 2035, which is, about 12, 13 years from now, something like that. Things can happen. Investment results are never steady. We don't really average 6.8 every year. We don't get 6.8 every year. In 2021, we earned 17%, but we lost 7% last year. So markets go up and down. So this is a long-term average we're talking about. And at times we can, and you can see if you understand the calculation, if you reduce the rate of return, the discount rate, that means you have these liabilities out there and you discount them less, which means the result is larger. And that's exactly what's happened over the last 10 years or so in the system because financial markets have been pretty tough. At one point, the system was estimating an 8% rate of return, and it took it to 7.75, then to 7, and it's now 6.8. And every time we did that, that blew up the liabilities. So that's why the fund has been a little, at times, hasn't made faster progress. Nonetheless, when you look at this fund, it's in good shape. We will get to 100% and get there actually pretty rapidly. And it could be faster than 12 or 13 years. I think in the end, you've heard testimony from the firefighters about how this program works. I'd be a little remiss if I didn't talk about governance. I am hired by the Wyoming Retirement Board. Kurt Meyer, the state treasurer, serves on that board along with 10 people that are appointed by the governor. They hire me, I hire the staff. But there's another board that I also work for, and that's the Volunteer Firefighter, EMT, and Search and Rescue Board. There's a separate board to oversee this $100 million fund and provide expertise on it. Some would say that's because it deserves and needs the expertise of people that are actually in the field providing this essential service to the citizens of Wyoming. Some would also say that Dave Swindell just needs a heck of a lot of supervision. And Mr. Chairman, I say both statements are probably true. Anyway, I am joined at the dais here by our vice chairman of the board, Lanny Applegate, resides in Cheyenne, but a recovering fire chief from the city of Lander. And then on my right, your left, is Eric Quinney from Uintah County. He's already been introduced to you. He represents the EMT part of the pension system. Sheriff Clint Becker of Converse County represents the search and rescue part, and the other members of the board are firefighters. They do an excellent job. They monitor the service records, make sure the attendance is correct, that the people that are on the pension are in fact true bona fide volunteers that are performing service and worthy of the support that the legislature provides. Mr. Chairman, that concludes my remarks, subject to questions from you or members of the committee.
Mr. Co-Chairman, go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. Question on tracking. Do all the fire districts just send you a list once a year with their membership? To be enrolled in the volunteer firefighter retirement, how do you know who qualifies when they apply and that they've legitimately done 5 years or 10, however many years of service?
Director, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, contributions are reported by these agencies monthly. So they monthly remit the monthly contributions to us, and that's how they get service credit for that month. We have an internal audit department, and with the guidance of the volunteer board, we do audit the attendance records of all 117 agencies on about a 5-year rotating schedule, with some additional visits and more frequent visits for places that seem to have some administrative issues. These are volunteer systems that vary in their administrative capacity. They are allowed by special dispensation in the law to actually remit the contributions within 90 days on a monthly basis, but you can be up to 90 days behind. And that's because some of these places, hey, if the payroll person, the administrative person's on vacation that month, there just isn't anybody. And so we have that flexibility. But that's how it's done. So they pay the contributions monthly. We record it monthly. We establish that there's an electronic enrollment. It's an Excel spreadsheet that comes in, and then we audit the service attendance. And if any adjustments are necessary, we bring that to the attention of the board, and they make the appropriate decision as to what to do about that service credit, whether to maintain it or to revoke it or to adjust it.
Representative Ward.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So if I were a firefighter, I would prefer that you take my contributions, what is it, $18.75 a month or $37.50 a month. You let me take them and you let me put them in a 401k type return. Call it a healthy mistrust of government. As a person, I would rather manage my own retirement than rely on the government to do that. So here's my question. If you allowed firefighters to have that choice, say we grandfather everyone who's currently in the system in, but new firefighters could have a choice between a pension and a 401k system, how would that change the calculation here?
Director.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Ward, well, the first thing the legislature would have to decide is what happens to the $3 million that the legislature puts in. How are you going to distribute that? Because that's in addition to the member contributions. Member contributions about what, I think it's on the list, $500 and some thousand a year. Obviously, if it's just the $18.75 that's going per month into an account, it's nowhere near going to have the economic value that the pension has. So you'd have to do some adjustment to allocate that. And then you would have to have a record keeper to administer these accounts, which would increase the cost. In systems, in larger pension systems where there is a choice, because some states have this, they have a choice of either a 401k system or you can be in the pension. Most employees overwhelmingly choose the pension. And that's because the pension always offers more economic value for the same dollar going in, because it's just more efficient. You get professional, diversified management. The pension offers disability and death benefits while you're in service that are not part of a 401k program. And the pension solves the pooled risk problem of longevity. Mr. Chairman, this is a silly business I'm in because living longer is a risk and can be a difficult thing for someone who just has a pot of money. How long are you going to live? No one knows. It's the longevity situation. In a pension system, longevity is pooled. And so we just have to shoot for the average, and the actuaries are really good at that. But no individual knows how long they're going to be. It's a wonderful life, but nobody gets out of it alive. And so the individual has this hard time of how to manage this lump sum of money if they are able to accumulate it. The 401k rules are designed for individual management, and some people manage it better than others. Some people make good investments and do well. Some people If it's not mandatory as to how much they put in, they don't generate enough money, they don't know how to manage it. And nobody knows how to manage the longevity risk unless you annuitize it. And the pension is a more efficient way to annuitize it than go into a life insurance company. So I don't know. In the end, it would be up to, I suppose, it's the employer and the legislative oversight of that. We will administer whatever pension program the legislature devises, but there are these issues. In the end, if it was in fact received by the perceived by the firefighters as being more beneficial, then they would advocate for it. In experience that we are aware of, generally that's not been the case because of the advantages of the pension. It's not that it can't be designed that way, but you have to put more money into it. It would cost more to have an equivalent benefit that would be rich enough to overcome some of these issues. It can be done.
Representative, go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Gentlemen, so once a fund becomes 100% funded, we're putting this, say, $3 million in a year, what happens to that money then? Is it still needed for ongoing costs? And do we have any funds that are fully funded?
We have a couple of funds that are nearly fully funded. The judge's plan is pretty close to fully funded. I think all the funds that we had, one though on a market value basis, the judge's fund was 101% last year, but then last year's market loss put them back down. So when you're 100% funded, that can change. Next year's investment results, another change to the assumption. If you want to take the discount rate down to 6.5%, at the stroke of a pen, you were fully funded, now you're not, right? So you want a margin of error, usually about 13%, 15%, which would be considered one market value deviation before you would want to do anything about contributions into the system, reducing those, or paying a COLA or increasing benefits. In the end, once this plan gets to that level, it'll be a judgment call. If the benefits hadn't been improved in some time, there would be some pressure to increase the benefits a little bit. The plan is, by design, has to be subsidized to some degree. Would you need $3 million going into a year? Maybe you can get by with $2 million on a sustainable basis, because part of the money at this point does need to, you're trying to gain ground, and you need the full subsidy to do that. But you would still need, this plan would always need a fairly substantial contribution rate from the state to maintain its actuarial soundness. Otherwise, you'd slide back down.
Further questions, committee? Senator Hutchins.
Yes, Mr. Chair, thank you. This is kind of incidental, as I'm heard you mention the spouse would receive the benefits for life if the member was to pass. Does the member pay a percentage to have that increase in the spouse? And what do you do when there are spouses?
Director.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Hutchins, that benefit design is paid for by the combination of the employee contributions and the state subsidy. And so it's just kind of built into that rate. It's a contingent annuity. If the firefighter retires, draws their $350 a month benefit, that when that firefighter passes and they were married at the time they retired, they would that survive, and the spouse still survives past that, then the spouse gets 2/3 of that amount, 66.6%. Now, of course, if the spouse has passed or first, well, then there's no payment made. That's just the insurance bet that went one way versus the other. And of course, there's always the people that aren't married. And they don't have, their benefits available if they got married, but it's if they aren't married, they don't have that spousal benefit because they don't have a spouse. And it's just part of the plan design. All of these elements are part of plan design to provide a benefit that is best for the overall group, and because it's pooled, it's fairly efficient to do it that way. The vesting requirements, you don't have to have 5 years vesting. You could make it 4. You could make it 6. Warden and patrol, it's 6. Those are elements of plan design that are usually designed to the employer's benefit. For the firefighter service, they really don't want to have they want to have people stick around for at least 5 years because you got to train these folks. And if it's a hook to try to get them to stay, that's beneficial. And so that's part of plan design that really is kind of intertwined with human resources and manning the force.
Further questions, committee? Seeing none. Mr. Applegate.
Mr. Chairman, just a little bit more information on the pension itself. Since its inception, which was back in June of 1967, there's been 8,779 people that's participated in the plan. And of that, for various reasons, 4,377 have resigned or terminated in some fashion. Maybe their job took them somewhere else, or they just didn't have the time to put into it anymore or whatever. And as Director Swindell mentioned, that brings us to the 1,400 retirees, and around 2,400 in that area are still on there. The other thing I think it's worth mentioning, when this pension first started, the very first full year, the contributions that we took in from individuals putting in and the state putting in, the first full year amounted to $49,562. Today, that amount, well, I'll take in 2021, took in $5,200,000. And then in 22, that's when we lost that 40%. It went from $5,200,000 to $2,400,000. That's, you know, that 40% that we put into Plan A that needed to be done. So we recognize that, and it was a good move. But that's just a little bit of historical. You know, it went from a few $1,000s to a couple $1 million. It went to $5 million, and we're down to $3 million today. So the board has worked very closely together, and like Director Swindell, all these accounts are audited quite often. And a lot of us by computer random. You might get audited twice in the same year, or it might be once every 5 years. And then if we hear about a department that we hear that they're not doing what they should be doing and letting some people slide, the board, as members of the board, we go request an audit. We go to our director or the head of an audit committee and say, go audit that committee. You know, we don't want this to be something where you just go through a couple of hoops and you can draw a pension. We want them to earn this, and that's what it's all about. Yeah, they want to help protect their neighbors, but there's a cost to that too. And that cost is get your value out of this year, make your contribution worthwhile. So nobody gets a free ride. With that, thank you again to all the legislature over the years, good number of years, that has made this plan as what it is today, and the volunteers.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for your attention today, and it's an opportunity for me to thank you for your service, since we're talking about volunteer service. Representative Ward, day off, great day off for a legislative committee meeting. Thanks for your service.
Thank you, gentlemen. Okay, that brings us to the final presentation before public comment. Director Cooley. I heard something about a break, and I'm sorry, we're going to take, it is now 3:52. Let's be back here at 4 o'clock. We'll give Director Cooley 8 minutes to prepare.
Hey, it's my kid.
Okay, committee, we are back in session. Director Cooley, welcome. You are the finale act. Make it great.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Robin Cooley. I am the Director of the Department of Workforce Services, and I'll be very brief. The information that we provided you, again, was information on wage averages, numbers in Wyoming. Those are career numbers, the 630 there. So that information, also on this annual wage, we did determine that that does not include fringe benefits. So we're comparing apples to apples here when we're talking about these average annual wages. But I also wanted to mention the UI and work comp. So for unemployment benefits, that is wage replacement benefits. So if no wage is paid, then there is no benefit. Of course, there would be for the career individuals. For workers' comp, work comp does cover firefighters if they are volunteer firefighters. The counties then report them under a volunteer code, and there's a premium that's paid then based on an imputed wage that our actuary assigns to that class code. So right now it's around between $250 and $275 a month for those work comp benefits. So I think that covers, and I do want to mention the issue of job fairs. We have those routinely around the state. We'd be happy to work with any of these individuals in the audience and others on job fairs for this particular employment opportunity. And I would stand for questions.
Questions, committee? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, that brings us to the final item on our agenda, and that would be public comments. That would include those folks online. Mr. Reddy, please come back up. If there's anybody online that's listening and wants to do public comment, now's your opportunity, but I suspect our crowd has dwindled. Mr. Reddy, reintroduce yourself and go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Kevin Reddy. I am the president of the Federated Firefighters of Wyoming. We represent 9 career fire departments across the state. I currently live and work in Cheyenne, been down there about 20 years, and I greatly appreciate the opportunity to talk about recruitment and retention. I appreciate what my peers have brought from the other fire services across the state as far as their troubles with recruitment and retention. And I can assure you in talking with members of my employers that we suffer from the same and similar issues. When I tested in 1999 for the city of Cheyenne, I walked in the room, there was approximately 400 applicants for a 2-year list that had 10 job openings. Now we're running a 1-year list. We have the same 10 job openings, and there's less than 100 applicants coming into the city of Cheyenne. And that story plays out all across the state. It is a fire service issue really all over the nation. You've seen a lot of interesting recruitment ideas in the career service. Once we get members in the door, we find that if they stay 5 years, they have a tendency to stay their entire careers. One retention idea that I would bring to the committee is we have a retirement age of 50 is the time that we can draw our pension. We also have a state mandatory retirement age of 60. But at age 50, that's when we can draw our pension, but we stop accruing any benefit at our pension after 25 years of service. And one option would be if we were going to continue work past 25 years, if we could be allowed to keep accruing the same 2.8% that we earn in our first 25 years, that might retain some employees for a few years past their 25 years of service. In the WRS pension handbook that's been handed out, if you look at the paid Fire B pension service, as you can see, we get 70% after 25 years of service, but then when you go up to 30 years of service, it's still 70%. And that might aid in retaining firefighters. We also have several battalion chiefs, division chiefs, deputy chiefs, et cetera, that after their career service is done, they may have an opportunity to be employed by another fire department in the state of Wyoming. If they leave their career fire department job and retire, if they were to get employed by another fire department in the state, they would have to stop collecting their pension and when they were hired again. So again, if they can continue to accrue in the Fireman B past 25 years, that might retain some of our members. With that, I'll stand for any questions.
I have one question for you. And that question is, can you tell us just, and I don't see it in the book, but what is the average retirement age on a career firefighter in the state of Wyoming, not nationally?
I can't speak to the state. I don't have that number ahead of me, but a few years ago when I was the local secretary treasurer, the average age in Cheyenne was approximately 55.
Representative, go ahead. Representative Hearn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. How many employees are in that 50-year-old timeframe that you might be able to retain if we were to do something?
Go ahead.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, Representative O'Hearn, I don't have that number. I would have to do a little research to figure out how old our members are.
Further questions, committee? I would be interested to know if you would research and bring back both those things. But number 3 would be what percentage of those firefighters who retire at 55 actually go and do another job, to another fire department or whatever. I would be interested to know I know what my friends who are retired are doing, but I'm curious what the bulk of those people are doing. So I would be interested now if you can get that for us.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Further questions, committee? Seeing none. Further public comments? Further public comment, going once. Going twice. Anybody online, Katie? No takers. You guys are boring.
You want some motions?
Committee, it's that time. Let's hear some motions. If you got them, I suspect there's a few hanging out there. Anybody?
I'll start if I can.
Go
Mr.
ahead, Mr. Co-Chairman.
I'd like I would move for LSO to draft a bill. Basically, the concept would be adding volunteer firefighters to the veterans exemption, where we give $3,000 off of their property taxes. And so including volunteer firefighters under certain regulations we could discuss to have that same benefit we offer veterans.
Question?
And with a fiscal note of the number of what, 4,500 or 3,900.
And what I would put out for the committee is these are rough ideas. We'll have a number of things come back to us at our June meeting, and we can then dissent, approve, discuss, et cetera, and move those. Any comments? Go ahead, Representative Ward.
Doesn't that create a special class of taxpayer, and are we allowed to do that?
Go ahead, Mr. Co-Chairman.
We certainly do it for veterans. So is it we don't offer, it's called an exemption. So they get, I'm trying to think of how we word it correctly, that it's not a protected or a special class of, or the necessary support of the poor, but it's a benefit that's fully reimbursed by the department to counties for offering that exemption off their taxes. So modeled after that same statute, I would assume it's allowed.
I have a comment.
Go ahead, Representative Trio.
Not all volunteer firefighters are property owners. So I don't know if that would be a fair assessment because I lived in an apartment when I was a firefighter. So no, I don't think that's a good idea.
And Mr. Chairman, how the program works, that if you're not a property owner, it gets counted towards your vehicle payments. So currently with the veterans exemption for the 3,000 break, if you don't own property, you can then apply it to the other taxes charged by your county treasurer. Most likely it goes towards your vehicle registration fees for an exemption.
My car's under my dad's name. What's my?
I can't give you special legislation. I can just say if we can model after that. Out of looking at all of these ideas, and they're great ideas, trying to find something that's going to stick on the wall that I think is both achievable and a legitimate government function, that idea says, hey, we can copy an existing program. If we do this for people who've already served, our our country. We could certainly do it for people who are currently serving our cities and communities. And again, it'd have to be fine tuned with a fiscal note. I was just trying to throw out an idea out of all of these that I thought we could spend some time on and see if that would be a potential way to move forward.
I would propose, committee, that we do have that drafted, and then we can have that discussion, get back there again. So you've heard
Mr.
this on a
Chairman.
broken record, but that we have that discussion, and we look at it. If it's not workable, if we find it's problematic, we won't pass it. It'll be a rapid discussion in June. It won't be a long discussion. Okay, go ahead, Representative Clausen.
Looking at a motion last year on House Bill 45, the peace officer retirement and rehiring law that we passed. We could do something similar for the professional firefighters.
Okay, let's do the motion that's on the floor first, but hold on to that. So committee, just simple voice vote. All in favor of having that drafted, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, say no. No. Raise hands. All opposed, please raise your hands.
All in favor?
All in favor, raise your hands. I'm dyslexic. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That passes. Now, Representative. So LSO got that for the draft? Okay, go ahead, sir.
Thank you. I'd make a motion that we have LSO draft legislation similar to House Bill 45 from last year, the peace officer retirement and rehiring, and look at that for professional firefighters.
I believe he meant to say career firefighters, but I knew what he meant. Okay, discussion on that, committee? Okay, go ahead, Representative.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just refresh my memory on what we did with that and who it applied to and what the benefits were on that.
So I'll read this here. This act amends Wyoming State Highway Patrol, Game and Fish Warden, Criminal Investigator Retirement Plan to allow an employer to rehire a member who has retired without suspending the retired member's pension benefit. So we were having a problem, shortage of, especially the Highway Patrol was brought up, and Game and Fish. These guys were mandatorily retiring, but we had a shortage. They were not coming back to work because if they did, they'd lose that retirement benefit that they had earned. So what we changed last year is they could get their salary and still continue to get the retirement that they had earned over their career. So I'm suggesting we do the same thing for these career firefighters.
Go ahead, Representative.
I'm just wondering, given that the majority of our workforce is volunteer, how many of this is this actually going to affect? Or is this going to help? I mean, if there isn't a budget to have paid service, then that's the reason we have volunteers. And so, you know, a lot, when looking at these numbers from the survey that was filled out, it just seems like we, in majority, have volunteer, which that wouldn't affect.
And my mind is not working. Can you give me those exact numbers, Director?
Mr. Chairman, Byron Matthews, Wyoming State Fire Marshal. The numbers we talked about earlier was 4,500 total firefighters, approximately 3,900 being volunteers, 600-ish being in the career. Maybe to answer the representative's question, it may give an opportunity for the 600 that are in a career service to move to a volunteer service that has that opportunity at just off the cuff.
And actually, I think that's a pretty prevalent thing that happens. A lot of career firefighters, myself included, move to volunteer. Senator Hutchins, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm not saying I like or dislike the idea, but that's a topic that is being brought up here at the very end with really no previous discussion. So I think that could either be a personal bill or maybe something we can bring up later that was not listed in any of the topics of discussion. So I'm just a little concerned about that. Thank you.
And I would say to that, I think that this offers us the opportunity to discuss that further. And I think the proposal that we do this gives the opportunity to Mr. Reddy, to those folks, to bring back the information, to have a physical note, et cetera, that we will need to discuss that more in depth and make a better informed decision. And if we decide then that it's not something, or something that somebody wants to bring as an individual bill at that time, certainly that's possible. But I would say this gives us the opportunity to look at it a little deeper and maybe have a better discussion. So with that in mind, all in favor of that motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no.
No.
That passes. The committee, that bill, LSO got that? Now we're moving right along. I'll make the next motion since I'm kind of bored here. That motion would be for, to direct a draft of a bill, and I don't want to put any amounts of money, we will leave that blank on there for now, but I would like a bill or a legislation that directs some sort of a publicity, or I don't even know the right wording for it, but would direct the State Fire Marshal's office to coordinate with perhaps the Fire Chiefs Association, with the Workforce Services, and make a publicity film, if you will. If anybody's got better wording.
Marketing campaign?
There you go. But it not be an hour and a half long, because you can't have popcorn with every viewing, but it'd be something in the 15, 20-minute range that you can present at a health fair, present at a high school, present on YouTube, present on Facebook. And the budget, I guess I would ask those folks to survey and see how much you think that would cost to make with people that, you know, have nice smiles and that make sense. But that would be my proposal, that we leave that amount blank on the proposed bill, and we'll come up with that when we consider the legislation, whatever that amount would be to make that piece of legislation. Go ahead, Senator Bartle.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So to be clear, we're basically giving the fire marshal's office a duty to accomplish this. Is that what the bill is doing?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
With the sidebars of exactly what we want. Discussion committee. You guys need a break. You're all way too quiet. Okay, all in favor of that motion, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, say no. No. I believe that's passed. Nobody's calling for, okay, we'll do it. What's that? We certainly can. Let's. Division would be the word we're looking for. All in favor, please raise your hands. All opposed, same. That has passed. Okay, further motions committee.
Mr. Chairman.
Representative Ian.
I have two that I would like to make. Mr. Chairman, I'll move for a bill draft for a draft that is similar to the Virginia law that was in Ms. Shippen's memo, that was allowing for state employees to have 24 hours specifically for allowance for volunteering in either EMS or firefighting.
Discussion committee. Go ahead and repeat that if you would.
So, Mr. Chairman, the motion was a bill draft that's similar to the Virginia statute. That's the suggestion that allows state employees specifically to have 24 hours of time off that can be used for EMS or firefighting volunteering.
Okay, discussion committee. Representative Ward.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't support mandating that.
Okay. Senator Bouchard, did you have something?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I don't know the specifics of the bill he's talking about, but what if they don't have any experience or training? I mean, is there specifics in that bill that says they have to have had training and had to be in the system, or where is this really going?
Go ahead, Representative Ian.
Mr. Chairman, so if you look in both Ms. Shippen's memo and what the volunteer firefighters brought forth, there was a suggestion about policy allowing state employees to use some of their free time to volunteer within firefighting EMS. I mean, you can't be within that service without taking training. So training would have to be required, because otherwise the volunteer services are not going to allow you to volunteer for those services. So it would have to be specific for the volunteer firefighter and EMS services that are within the state of Wyoming that are part of those governmental entities that perform those volunteer services.
Okay. Further discussion committee. Senator Bouchard.
Mr. Chairman, I would just like to see some numbers of people that are already working for the state and that would be interested in this before we take the time to do this.
Representative Young?
Mr. Chairman, those are the kinds of things that could come if we motion to draft a bill, so those kinds of numbers can come forward at our next meeting.
Thank you.
And again, it's not a mandate. All it is allowing for an extra 24 hours for our state employees, if they choose to volunteer, allowing them to have that time.
I suspect we can get that number. If we choose to draft that bill, we can get that number for the next meeting. Go ahead, Representative.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Would this be specific then to firefighters? Would this be specific to EMS? Would it